Jewish Education in Media is pleased to present L'Chaim, a program that highlights the people, issues, and events of importance to the Jewish community. Now here is your host, Rabbi Mark Golub.
It's a summer day in 1964. Three young men sit anxiously in a county jail in Mississippi. The oldest is 24 years old, white, Jewish, from New York City, a graduate of Cornell, a social worker with a passionate belief in the good of people, convinced that if he could only speak quietly to the local white community, he could touch their souls and persuade them that their hatred and treatment of blacks was misguided. He and his wife Rita had come down to Mississippi 6 months earlier as staff directors of the County Office of CORE, the Congress of Racial Equality, and had been extremely successful in implementing many of the programs and goals of the civil rights movement. And for his success, this 24-year-old Jew from New York had become the #1 enemy of those who worshipped in sheets and pillowcases. They called him Goatee because of his dark, short beard, and they loathed him. Goatee's cellmate is another white man, 21 years old, also a Jew from New York, a graduate student at City College majoring in anthropology. Out of his idealism, he'd arrived in Mississippi as a summer volunteer just 2 days earlier. He hoped that one day he would be just like Goatee. The third young man is in a different cell, in the back of the jail, where the black boys are held. He's also 21, a local man from Meridian, who was inspired by his courageous mother, Fanny Lee, to become involved in the civil rights movement at the age of 16. He, too, is a staff member at CORE. The three young men have been in jail more than 6 hours since mid-afternoon, when the deputy sheriff arrested the black boy for speeding and took Goatee and his companion into custody for questioning in the recent firebombing of a local church. The police had ignored them all afternoon and evening long. They had been denied the right to make a phone call. And then they were suddenly released sometime after 10 p.m. The deputy sheriff led the three young men to their blue Ford station wagon, and the three drove away toward Highway 19 and the city of Meridian. The police escort that had followed them from the jail fell away about a half-mile down the highway, and Goatee felt a great sense of relief. What the three civil rights workers could not have known as they carefully drove the speed limit back toward Meridian was that the deputy sheriff was soon pushing his gleaming police car as fast as it could go to catch up with the station wagon before it reached the county line. And right behind the deputy's police car were 2 other cars carrying 6 men who'd been waiting impatiently all evening for this moment. They caught up with the station wagon less than 10 miles from the county line, and a high-speed chase ensued from one highway to another, until finally the station wagon came to a stop on the side of the road. Passively, Goatee and his 2 companions surrendered. The deputy sheriff ordered the 3 young men into the back seat of his police car. The 3 cars turned around, and moments later the deputy turned left onto Rock Cut Road, an unlit, unmarked dirt turnoff that disappears quickly from Highway 19. Then the car engines stopped, and the forested road was suddenly silent. One of the 6 men from the other cars, a burly, 26-year-old ex-Marine and a former local high school football star, strode up to the police car and yanked open the left rear door. With a gun in one hand, he grabbed a fistful of Goatee's Cambry shirt and pulled him out of the car and to his feet. "Are you a nigger lover?" the man with the gun demanded. "Sir," answered Goatee from under his blue New York Mets cap, "I know just how you feel." With that, the man placed his gun to Goatee's heart and fired once at point-blank range. Michael Schwerner, the 24-year-old Jewish social worker from New York City and Cornell, fell in the gully of Rock Cut Road, dead. Then the 2 other men were also taken from the back seat of the police car and shot dead. First, the 21-year-old Jewish anthropology major from New York City and City College, Andrew Goodman. Then the 21-year-old black man from Meridian, James Chaney, known to all his friends as J.E. It took the FBI 44 days of intense searching to find the deeply hidden bodies of Mickey Schwerner, Andy Goodman, and James Chaney, a search that, in the summer of 1964, impassioned national American commitment for the civil rights movement and the struggle to bring dignity and racial equality to the United States of America. I'm Mark Golub, and all of us experience moments in history which both touch us in inexplicable ways and shape who we are in small but profound ways that stay with us forever. For me, there was the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. There was the Six-Day War and Kent State. And then there was Schwerner, Chaney, and Goodman. For me, as a young liberal Jew growing up in the 1960s, the name Schwerner, Chaney, and Goodman came to epitomize, encapsulate the essence of the times, stood as a clarion call for all that was both the darkest evil of our nation and the highest, most transcendent good and right and noble. Schwerner, Chaney, and Goodman became symbols of an entire movement for an entire generation. It swept across this nation, bent on ultimately fulfilling the promise of our founding fathers to forge a social experiment called the United States of America, which guaranteed every child, woman, and man the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. A nation which all people of every ethnicity, national origin, religion, economic station, gender or sexual orientation, and every race and every color, all its citizens would be understood to be created equal, divinely endowed with unalienable rights to full and equal protection under the law and participation in the bounties of a revolutionary new vision of a profoundly just and humane social order. For me, Schwerner, Chaney, and Goodman were heroes in a grand line of American patriots, and I have carried them with me from the moment I learned of their tragic, heroic story to this very day. And if any of you are too young to know the names and story of Schwerner, Chaney, and Goodman, if you've somehow forgotten, if you somehow missed that chapter of American history, Mickey Schwerner, James Chaney, and Andrew Goodman were 3 young civil rights workers, an African American and 2 Jews, who were in Mississippi in 1964 to help African Americans register to vote at a time when parts of these United States made it difficult, if not nearly impossible, for African Americans to exercise their God-given, unalienable right to vote in pursuit of their own happiness. And on this edition of L'Chaim, I have the extraordinary privilege and honor of sitting with the brother of Andy Goodman, David Goodman, who's the president of a foundation established by Andrew Goodman's parents, Robert and Carolyn Goodman. The Andrew Goodman Foundation, with the mission of empowering the next generation to initiate and sustain creative and effective social action that will inspire, educate, and reward people who take personal responsibility for bettering our world. And David, I told you when you first came, I have wanted to sit with you for so long. It is an enormous honor for me to have you at this table. And I thank you for joining us on L'Chaim.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm honored to be on your show.
So you heard the open, and I worried a little bit. Was it hard for you to hear?
Well, 52 years has gone by, and that period of time, and you never get used to an event like that. Not only was it a personal experience. I was 17 years old at the time. My brother was 3 years older than me. So, and I grew up in kind of a, let's say, a bubble. I was well educated for a 17-year-old. My grandfather used to say, ask a 17-year-old a question because they know everything. But
which high school?
I went to a private school. All three of us. There were 3 brothers. I was the youngest. Andy was the middle, and Jonathan was the eldest. We all went to the Walden School. There were 10 Goodman cousins in that school, and we lived together even in the summer. So there was a lot that we knew, but a lot we didn't know, and we didn't know what we didn't know. And this experience, so I had just graduated from high school 2 weeks before that he went missing. It was a shock in multiple ways, and you never get used to it. And it wasn't just the obvious shock of losing a brother. It was an awakening, a consciousness that you talk about these self-evident truths, that you recited basically the cornerstone, the keystone of our great democratic experience and experiment, self-evident truths. I believe that. I thought, that's true, and that's an ideal, I understand it, but I also thought that was also everyday practice. But there's a big gap between these ideals and these everyday practices. I didn't appreciate the gap, the gully into which hundreds of millions of people fall globally, billions, because all people are created equal. To even reduce that down to a shorter sentence, or a shorter 10-second soundbite, is probably repeated more often than any set of prose anywhere, in any language, in any place in the world. Thomas Jefferson wrote that in the Declaration of Independence. And I just believe that's true. That was true. Everybody thought it was true. Everybody acted that way. I didn't know that a lot of people did not act that way. So it was, even when you said what you said just now, it just, I feel not electrified as in terms of shock, but reminded that there's this big gap that crosses all ethnic groups, crosses national boundaries. We see it every day in the news, in one shape or form or another. So it's hard to take when I realize once again, moment to moment, or that we got a lot of work to do to close that gap. And that's what my brother was trying to do.
It sounded like all of you, the cousins, were very close. Is that true?
Oh, yeah. Oh, very close. Closer than close. We were more like brothers and sisters, more than my cousins. That's how we were brought up.
And, what was your brother Andy like? And do you remember him enough?
Oh, yeah, yeah. I mean, sure. I mean, I was 17. So it wasn't like this happened when I was,
4 or 5.
4 or
right?
5.
Yeah. So what was he like?
Well, he was the middle of the 3 kids. He was kind of like the arbiter. He was when if my elder brother and I got in a fight, he'd be in the middle. Don't fight, be reasonable, negotiate. He didn't use that word, but he was a peacemaker.
Gentle?
Very, very. He was. And handsome kid, very handsome, very popular in his class. So we were all in the same school, too.
Okay.
That's another thing. All 10 cousins went to the Walden School.
And everybody knows all of you.
Everybody knows everybody else.
Just out of curiosity, do you have a girlfriend?
Well, he did, yeah. Yeah, he did.
So he had a girlfriend in high school, college?
High school, that I recall. And then I don't exactly know what happened when he went to college, but he actually went to college. He graduated in 61. I graduated in 64. He's 3 years older. And he went to the University of Wisconsin. And I do know they corresponded.
Very nice.
Up until,
okay.
I think, the second year.
And again, just to give me a sense, did he like sports or no?
He loved sports.
What was his favorite?
Baseball.
Baseball. Who did he root for?
Well, in New York, you rooted for the Brooklyn Dodgers. That's, and we had the great honor of knowing Jackie Robinson.
No kidding.
Yeah. Jackie lived a couple of blocks away from us.
Different world, David?
Different world. What an awesome person. And my brother was a hero because he got Jackie to come to the school once.
Andy gets
Jackie Robinson to come to the Walden School.
Wow.
Yeah, that's a big deal.
At
this point, Jackie had retired. Yeah.
Okay, so he liked the Brooklyn Dodgers till they left.
Yeah, actually, I'm not a big baseball fan, but when he said we're going to,
Ebbets Field?
Ebbets Field, I went.
Did Andy have a sense of humor?
Oh yeah, he did. Wonderful sense of humor.
So he was lovely, gentle, bright.
Very smart and very disciplined, and he could be stern when he saw a bully. For example, I'll never forget this. Some kid was pushing me. I was a 90-pound weakling. He was pushing me around, and my brother came up to him, and he said, if you want to push someone around, push me around. He wasn't big, tall, but he was broad and very strong. No one wanted to mess with him. And I actually, I'll admit, saw him hit somebody once who pushed him. That was the last time they pushed him around. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Kids do that.
Okay. Describe the home your parents create for the 3 of you. And I want to know, I'm curious to know the extent to which the idealism that motivated your brother, did it come out of the world your parents created? So I want to know, first of all, was there a Jewish component to your home?
Well, we're a Jewish family, absolutely, yes. Through and through, certifiable. Were we Orthodox or very religious? No. My eldest brother got bar mitzvahed. Andy sort of started, and I didn't finish, but my eldest brother became a Lubavitcher Jew.
Jonathan?
Jonathan's a Lubavitcher Jew, lives in Israel, has 7 kids. And
isn't it amazing how life goes?
It is. And Johnny one day says, you're going to be bar mitzvah. He puts me on the bima and makes me read from the Torah on bar mitzvah. So,
but not Andy.
No, I don't recall that he did.
Did Andy feel? Do all of you feel Jewish?
Oh yeah, culturally.
Yes, that's what I mean.
Through and through, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
And
you can't grow up in our kind of family. You go to Passover. So my father at Passover would say, we're celebrating a social revolution. None of the other parents put it like that. And I kind of understood that.
Yes.
It's of course it's a social revolution.
Yes.
And he put a lot of life into the ceremony. And he didn't do it the way my more conservative religious uncles did it, because we go to their house sometimes. Sometimes they come around. But you heard consistently this story of we were slaves in Egypt. Everyone kind of, okay, just took it for granted, and we understood that. And my great-grandfather Goodman came from Lithuania, and he had 13 children. They were all born in New York City. So I knew, and they all lived some of them well into their 80s and 90s. I kind of heard stories about their father. They didn't talk much about their father, and that he came from Russia, where the pogroms were. I later read about what happened to the Jews. They were strung up, killed, murdered, and there was a obvious parallel, which I came to appreciate later on, between what happened in the South with African Americans who were lynched constantly and frequently, and what happened in the pogroms in Russia, Tsarist Russia. So as I got older, saw the parallel, and I think our parents certainly did.
Mm-hmm. So what do you think motivated your brother to become involved with CORE? He meets Schwerner in Ohio.
Correct.
Your brother, Schwerner, and Chaney are all together in Ohio.
Yes.
Schwerner's already pretty much involved with CORE. Chaney's involved with CORE. Your brother's sort of new to it.
Well, no. Yes and no. CORE, Chaney and Schwerner worked for CORE. My brother was a volunteer. He wasn't a worker. He was a volunteer along with 1,000 other students. They were embedded in SNCC, Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, that was associated with CORE. All the SNCC students got together first at Miami University in Ohio, Oxford, Ohio, and they were trained about nonviolent work and how to run a freedom school. That's where Andy, met Schwerner and Chaney. Actually, I've been told by people who were there that when Chaney and Schwerner heard about the church burnt in Neshoba County, they asked for a third volunteer to go with them, and they had to flip a coin to go, and my brother won the flip.
Won the flip.
Won the flip.
To go was to win.
To go was
not to lose. You flip, you won, you get to go.
You get to go. He aspired to contribute to this effort that I would characterize as leveling the playing field, making the vote applicable and available to all people. Mm-hmm. And he wanted to do something, and this was his way.
Yes. By the way, am I correct? He had been with the March on Washington?
Yes. The year before.
Yes. So this was already, this whole desire to contribute in this way was part of your brother already.
Yeah. When he was 15 years old, and I was 12, so I don't really remember this that well, but my mother told the story so often. He and his friend had heard about coal miners in West Virginia being non-union and basically living in abject poverty, because our family were contractors and most of our work were building tunnels. My grandfather built the 8th Avenue subway. My father worked on the Brooklyn Battery Tunnel, subway tunnels, water tunnels, sewer tunnels, and we knew about miners. Very dangerous work, the highest paid in New York. They were union. And he heard in West Virginia these were miners who were poor and didn't even have health insurance. So he got on a bus and went down there, and back in those days you could do that, it was safe. And interviewed people, just walked around someplace in West Virginia and came back, wrote a paper and read it in high school, I guess. And I just took it for granted. This is what he did. I didn't think it was dangerous per se. So he had been doing things like this in the past.
Okay. When he goes with Schwerner and Chaney to Mississippi, your parents, I'm sure, were aware of this. Did they ever express to you that they were concerned for his safety? Do you think they were concerned for his safety? Or at that point, nothing had happened.
Yeah.
And yes, you might face some ridicule and some jostling, but you didn't worry that anything worse than that would happen.
I didn't. I mean, I didn't understand
Sure.
the circumstances. I think that there were kind of two groups of people, parents. Those who knew what went on in this part of our country, and those that didn't appreciate and understand the depth of hatred, anger, and willingness around committing violence. I think my mother and father were not really totally aware of this. I'm not saying they were naive. My mother's been taped with answering this question. And the way she put it was, how could she have brought up her children to believe that all people are created equal and then tell them, well, you can't do anything about it in this case? She said it would be hypocritical for her. She says she put Band-Aids in, back in the day, it was iodine in his duffel bag, Band-Aid. Thought maybe someone would hit him or spit at him. By the way, these three young men were the only people murdered in that group of 1,000. Many other people had been murdered, but they were all black. And in the Freedom Rides, which John Lewis was a part of, and CORE organized, actually, no one was actually murdered, although there was plenty of attempted murders. John Lewis was beat up so badly, it's a miracle he didn't die, as were other people. For the people in the limelight, it was unusual. Most people who were murdered in the dark, which is what happened to my brother.
By the way, just to finish on CORE, it was led for a time by James Forman.
Yes.
Who was a remarkable.
Famous, actually. Famous guy.
Yes.
It's a movie about him.
Yeah. Okay, so it's the summer of '64. Where are you when all of a sudden your brother is missing?
Yeah, so I just graduated from high school, and I had a job on one of the construction jobs that my father ran, and I was getting up at 6 in the morning to go to work every day.
And how do you learn about this?
Well, I get up on a Monday, so they were murdered on June 21st, which was a Sunday. It was Father's Day, the longest day of the year, Father's Day, 1964. But we heard about it Monday, early Monday morning.
That he was missing.
That he was missing. And you know your mother by the time you're 17. I could tell just the way she was moving. Something was very much the matter. And I asked her, she said, your brother's missing. I said, what's going on? And I didn't really appreciate what that meant, missing. How can someone be missing? So that's how I found out about it, early Monday morning, June 22nd.
Okay. I already mentioned it takes the FBI a long 44 days of searching.
Mm-hmm.
Those are 44 days that you have to wait without knowing.
Mm.
So 2 questions. First of all, as the days move on, do you think your parents, did you begin to feel the worst, that he may have been killed, murdered? And, just take me back for a moment. What were those days like? What was the anxiety like? How did you get from one day to the next?
The murder of Goodman, Schwerner, and Chaney in this period was the bookend, the end of a year, starting with the assassination of John Kennedy. Okay? It was a stunning year. Again, in context, I didn't appreciate all that was going on. This case of 2 white boys and a black disappearing first. It was the disappearing part. Shocked the country. It was, and as time went by, I began to comprehend a little more about who we are as people, and it's my opinion that it shocked the country. At that time, unlike now, 90% of the population was white, Anglo, Caucasian Anglo. Now it's 65%. My brother wasn't murdered because he was white, or missing, or even, in my opinion, because he was an activist. He was murdered because the Klu Klux Klan and the millions of sympathizers, racists, segregationists, to them, black lives didn't matter, okay? Something that took me a while to understand also, in the greater context of things. And in my opinion, in white America, it didn't matter either. Black lives didn't matter to white people. But when white lives were taken, that mattered to white people. Had black lives mattered to them, my white brother's life would not have been taken. So as time went by, I came to appreciate that until black lives matter, white lives don't matter. That's a very hard concept to get across to Caucasian people. Very hard concept, and I think it is. I have a lot of people, I speak a lot in front of groups, particularly high school and college, and when the issue of black lives comes up, and I've been on panels with one of the founders of Black Lives Matter, Opal Tometi, who's just a wonderful, wonderful person. There's always someone in the audience, particularly when it's predominantly white, say, well, don't white lives matter too? As if, black lives are saying, well, white lives don't matter, but black. It's like, we don't get it. It's just like so hard to comprehend. And at the end of the day, it's like this. It's the poem that's in the Holocaust Museum, that they came for the labor unionists, but I didn't say anything, and then they came for the communists, and then they came for the Jews, and there was no one left to speak for me. So I look at these issues that if I'm in New York, if somebody that I'm aware of in Nevada, civil rights, are being denied or taken away or abridged, then my civil rights are being taken. I see that as homeland security. Our homeland is not secure when we turn a blind eye or don't pay attention to the demise, the marginalization of a person who looks different or is different. My life is demised. My life is in jeopardy. My security is in jeopardy. And it took me a while to come to this place, but there's a lot of upbringing that I had, that my brothers had, that my brother Andrew had, in appreciating that kind of state, that the way we lived, to understand that in order to have these ideals and these everyday practices congruent, we have to make sure it's congruent, because it's not guaranteed. And that's what I experienced during these 44 days. I came to understand it, and there were a lot of people around. There were a lot of people around us who were also kind of in a state of shock. We were mainly, most of my mother's friends were Jewish. We had, there's, in the Upper West Side of New York City, then and now, there was an affinity for certain African Americans and certain Jews to get together. For example, Harry Belafonte, who a lot of young people, they don't know his name, but he lived nearby. And he was in the entertainment. He was the Jay-Z of the time. Because he was in the entertainment business, knew a lot of Jewish people. There weren't a lot of big-time black actors that were generally accepted or known by the larger white community. He was one of them. Calypso, he was just fabulous entertainer. So I met him, and he was at the house. There were other people at the house. Harry Belafonte personally took money down to Mississippi to bail kids out of jail. He was a personal friend of Martin Luther King's. And the white Jewish progressive community and the African American people like Harry Belafonte, Forman, who also was a New Yorker, were there in our house with the media, and they helped us get through this period personally.
How hard was it on your mother and father?
Oh, I mean, terrible.
You remember that?
Oh, yeah. It was, losing a kid in a car accident is a tragedy. But this was an American tragedy. This story is an American story. This story is owned by America. It's not a Goodman, Schwerner, Chaney story. It's an American story. It brings together Jews and Christians, black and white, rich and poor, north and south. It's almost like, I hate to put it this way, a made-for-TV story around the inconsistencies of all people created equal and the glory and the collateral beauty of these three young men coming together to make sure or attempt to make these ideals a reality. It's a collateral damage and a collateral beauty story.
Do you have children?
Yes, 2.
You're a parent. As you look back on it, how did your parents survive?
Well, I mean, how does anyone survive a tragedy? You look for the benefit of the circumstance, and is there anything good that comes out of it? So what we've done in our family, and maybe this is how we survived, was to form the Andrew Goodman Foundation.
Okay, one step before that.
Yeah.
I want to know what happens when they do find the bodies, and now it's not what happened.
Yeah.
Do you remember that day?
Oh, yeah.
How do you learn the bodies have been found?
Okay, so President Johnson finds out from the FBI, and our families, particularly the Schwerners and the Goodmans,
Are you together at this point?
No.
Okay.
Well, they lived in Pelham, and we lived in Manhattan. But the FBI found the bodies buried in a dam in Neshoba County, Mississippi. By the way, Neshoba is the Choctaw Indian word for wolf. And they found the bodies, and Hoover, J. Edgar Hoover, the head of the FBI, calls the president, and the president tells his assistant, Lee White, who's his kind of like right-hand man, to call the families before it's announced in a press release, in a press statement. And Lee White called our house. This was the first night, coincidentally, that my parents went out. They went to Lincoln Center.
The first night since they'd been lost.
The 44 days they had not gone out.
And the phone rings.
The phone rings. I pick it up. I'm the only one at home. And Lee White's on the phone. I didn't know him. And he said, "Who are you?" I said, I'm David Goodman. He said, "Are you Andy Goodman's brother?" I said, "Yes." So he told me the news, which was devastating.
Mm-hmm.
And I called my godfather, who went to Lincoln Center to get my parents. That's how we found out about it.
Mm-hmm. When your brother is found, and he's found with Schwerner and Chaney, what do you remember the reaction of the country to be?
The press, for 44 days, we live on 86th Street between Amsterdam and Columbus, and there was so much press on this subject. It was, so I'm 17 years old, right? I mean, I'm basically a child. And what I remember most, the clearest memories, were the massive numbers of press at our house, outside. There were so many of them that the police had to be there almost 24/7 for 44 days. This was the biggest story for these 44 days, not just nationally, internationally. We had the press in our house every single day. My mother picked kind of a press manager, Gabe Pressman, okay, who just did an incredible job in controlling this mass of people. And they were very pushy. I mean, and they always wanted the scoop or whatever it was. That's what I remember. The intensity of wanting to know who were these people? Who was Andy Goodman? Why did he go there? What's this about? What happened? It's almost as if America said, what? White people are involved in these black people's problems? That doesn't make any sense. That's my takeaway. And that was my experience. Whether or not that was the case, I can't tell you. I'm just telling you how I experienced it. And over time, I've come to appreciate that the Ku Klux Klan and the racists, for lack of a better terminology, who ran Mississippi, Alabama, Louisiana, Texas, Florida, South Carolina, North Carolina, Virginia, West Virginia, and Arkansas. I mean, you're talking about a big part of the United States. Had absolutely no respect culturally, spiritually, as for the black community. In fact, they couldn't vote. So I realized that the rest of America woke up to that fact, which is kind of sad to take 2 white kids to get murdered before they realized that for a century black people were getting murdered collaterally.
But it did wake up the country.
It did.
You know,
I think it did.
I don't want to say but it's not worth your brother's life. But if your brother was going to die, there was enormous good that came out of it.
I think that's how we looked at it.
Mm-hmm.
And
it changed this nation.
It certainly changed the Jewish community.
How did it change the Jewish community?
I don't believe the Jewish community any more than the rest of particularly the non-Southern white Anglo-Caucasian community, paid much attention and arguably didn't care about what was happening to the African Americans, not just in the South, but all over the United States. And when 2 Jews were killed, 2 whites and Jews, I mean, you know, there weren't too many Jews as a percentage of the population. And yet the 1,000 white volunteers in SNCC who went to Mississippi, 50% of them were Jewish. And don't think the Jewish community didn't understand that, eventually, because of Goodman and Schwerner. It's kind of a sad story, in a way, that it took 2 white kids to get murdered for the white and the white Jewish community to pay attention. It's part of that story that is important today for all of us to understand that until marginalized lives matter, the majority lives don't matter. And this is really where the Andrew Goodman Foundation has evolved to in terms of specifically engaging young adults who are now the biggest part of our population. The baby boomers were the biggest, but now I'm a baby boomer, now we're about 43 or 44 million people. The generation now called millennials are 50 million. It's a big, big, big group. And disproportionately Latino, Latina, and Black and Asian, whereas the baby boomers are virtually 88% white. So there's a different cultural consciousness today. So we focus in the foundation on making young voices and votes a powerful force in democracy, which is what the young adults of 1964 Freedom Summer were doing.
Exactly.
So we've taken this iconic, powerful story, which is an American story. It's not my story, it's your story, it's our story, and said, look, these kids were ordinary kids who did something extraordinary. You can too. And you better if you care about your freedom and America.
I mentioned they make a movie, 1988, Mississippi Burning. In some way, it is stunning what happens to the people who are arrested, and put on trial. And it takes 3 years to get to the trial. John Doerr is a real hero in this process. Did you meet him?
Oh, yeah, I know. John is a national hero for many reasons.
For
not
many
just
reasons,
yeah.
right. The judge in the trial was virtually a racist. In the end, 7 were convicted, and they were not convicted of murder. And by the way, I just want to make sure I get it right here. The deputy sheriff gets 6 years. Bowers, who was part of the brain trust, got 10 years. The shooter, Wayne Roberts, this ex-Marine, gets 10 years. And when Cox is asked why such a rather puny sentence for what was murder, Cox says, "They killed 1 nigger, 1 Jew, 1 white man. I gave them all what I thought they deserved." When the verdict comes in, they're not convicted of murder. They're going to go away for a few years, and then they're going to be free. How does your mother feel? How does your father feel? How do you and your brother feel?
That could be a complicated answer, but I'll keep it simple. First of all, that was a federal trial, had nothing to do with murder. The feds cannot indict someone for murder.
They still got a very small sentence.
You can only, and nobody up to that point since Reconstruction, for 100 years, no white person was ever convicted of anything in terms of harming a black person. This was the first time. What the issue was that Robert Kennedy, who was the Attorney General, and John Doerr, who worked for Robert Kennedy, was a litigator in the Justice Department, took a cause of action that was very esoteric, and I won't bore you with the details, but basically it said if you deny someone their civil rights under the law as a policeman, if a policeman this was to keep the Klu Klux Klan in 18 whatever it was from murdering and harming African Americans. That's an old law. No one was ever trying it. So it was a federal case, and you're correct. Cox was a consummate racist, and he did say what you said, and we were surprised that anything happened at all. It was a different world then.
Yes.
And the South was a different place than the North in some respects. So the Justice Department was surprised that they got a conviction.
At all.
At all.
By the way, one man, when he's 75 years old, Killen, is convicted of murder, correct?
40 years later, manslaughter. He was tried 40 years later by the now Attorney General of the state of Mississippi. He was tried in murder under the guise of murder. He wasn't even physically at the scene of the crime. The people who were at the scene of the crime were never tried at all. Well, you can't be convicted if you're not tried, and you can't be tried if you're not indicted, and you can't be indicted if a grand jury doesn't do it, because society doesn't indict itself. That's how I viewed it.
My real question is, did it make you or your mother or your father or your brother angry?
That's a very interesting question, frequently asked. Anger is a powerful emotion, and usually it most adversely affects the person who's angry. We have been careful not to view this in terms of anger, but in terms of who are we as a nation, and are we willing to face who we are as a nation. And that's a struggle. That's a job, that's work, and you can't be angry and do work. We have, for the last 50 years, endeavored, rather to turn into anger, used our energy to look at a positive force for change. Anger is a waste of time. And it's destructive. It may motivate you, but it usually motivates you to, shoot somebody. So we've taken our life's energy and said, what can we do in the 21st century to deal with the forces, these forces of hatred, bigotry, and meanness.
That is lovely. Your wife is the administrator. She's the executive director
Yes.
of the Andrew Goodman Foundation.
Yes, she is.
And I described briefly what its mission is, and you already described beautifully what it does. But I want you to say it one more time.
Yeah.
What are you, your wife, and what did your late mother and father want to grow out of the work you were doing through the Andy Goodman Foundation?
Simply stated, we take this powerful story and say, how can we apply the spirit of a young man who got up off the couch, he didn't have to, wasn't watching TV, he got up off the couch and went and did something productive. That's it. How do you take that story and then do something with it? So we're in the 21st century today, and we're looking around, and guess what? Here we are in the United States of America, where we are supposed to have a democracy, and there's 22 states plus that have restrictive voting rights, that are cutting back on voter conveniences, that are eliminating same-day registration. Now, a lot of people don't know this because they are not exposed to it. It's the same old story with different details. So we've organized something called Vote Everywhere. It's a platform of the Andrew Goodman Foundation. We raise money for it. We fund it. We're in 42 colleges in 19 states. And we look for a number of things, and our student organizers, who are paid a stipend, like a scholarship stipend, and the school receives a sum of money to organize these young leaders. It's in a group in these 42 colleges, about 1 million students, to get out the vote, to register to vote, and to participate through organizing around things that are important to them in this day and age, whether it's recycling or it's about gay, queer people and their civil rights, whatever, and look for impediments to voting and fix them. For example, and that's what we do. We have agreements that we sign with the colleges, and these students work very hard. For example, in Louisiana State University, their student badges were not eligible ID badges. So the students were disciplined. They wrote a new law. They submitted it to the Louisiana State Legislature, who passed it 3 weeks ago. The governor signed it into law. Now, 139,000 Louisiana State University students can use their badge to vote, whereas half of them had motor vehicle or driver's licenses, the other half did not. So now everybody can use it. These are impediments to voting. These are not done by mistake. The impediments aren't there by mistake. They were put in place on purpose to make it harder for, make it harder for certain types of people to vote. I don't think I have to be any more obtuse than that. But they're wrong. It's wrong to do that. It was the same kind of action 50 years ago to marginalize certain voters, and we got to be vigilant as Americans to make sure our democracy experiment works every day, all the time, everywhere. That's why we call Vote Everywhere. And you vote not only in the voting booth. You vote with how you spend your money. You vote with your opinion. You vote with how you organize. You vote with how you get together, what you say to your friends. So this is how we have taken this iconic American story and put it to work today. And we're impacting, out of our 1 million students, and we measure impact, and we have all sorts of ways of measuring it, about 190,000 of the 1 million directly with our kind of action this year. It's a very, very effective program, and it's gaining traction all over the United States. It's a national program from New York to California, from Mississippi to Wisconsin.
Klu Klux to you. You know, I told you I wanted to meet you. And sometimes you meet somebody and they don't live up. You far exceeded anything I imagined.
Well, thank you, Rabbi.
No. You know, I'm sorry you lost your brother.
Yes.
I'm just sorry. I don't care if it's 50 some years ago. I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
Yeah.
You know, he should be
Well,
here.
it's like today, you know.
Should be here sitting.
Yeah.
But you're doing a tremendous service in his honor. And I can tell it has, touched your soul. You're a beautiful soul.
Thank you.
And what you speak about, I hope everybody hears. And you make us a better person. And so, in some way, your brother is making us all
Yes.
better people. He made me a better person, and I
thank
didn't
you.
know him.
Thank you.
And you've made me a better person for this hour I've spent with you.
Well, thank you.
And I can't thank you enough. I wish you kol tuv v'hatzlacha.
Thank
You represent the best of America and the best of the Jewish people
Thank
in
you.
America. We'll do this again, okay? Some other
Okay.
time.
Thank
Thank
you
you,
very
thank
much,
you,
Rabbi.
David.
Thank you.
David Goodman, brother of Andy Goodman, and president of the Andrew Goodman Foundation. And again, I don't know if all of you knew this story, maybe some of you didn't, and maybe many of you knew it in some vague way, and you know it better now. By the way, there's a book you might want to pick up. It's called My Mantelpiece. It was written by Carolyn Goodman with Brad Herzog, and it is a memoir of her survival and of social justice. Again, it's called My Mantelpiece. As always, I invite you to be in touch with me with any thoughts or comments you may have to anything expressed on this edition of L'Chaim. Please email me, write me, post on our Facebook wall, tweet me. I look forward to hearing from many of you. Until the next time, I'm Mark Golub. L'Chaim, my friends, to life.
L'Chaim is a presentation of Jewish education in media.
We would be pleased to send a complimentary DVD of this program to anyone who wishes to support JBS, the Jewish Broadcasting Service, with a tax-deductible gift of $36, double chai or more, to the nonprofit organization Jewish Education in Media. Simply visit the JBS homepage and click on the Donate button to make a donation by PayPal or your credit card. And please indicate the program for which you would like a DVD. Or you can send your tax-deductible check made out to Jem, Post Office Box 180, Riverdale Station, Bronx, New York 10471. And again, please remember to indicate which program you would like to receive with our compliments. And we thank you for your kind support.